Greetings, C3RF members and friends across the country and indeed around the world, and welcome to a special in-hot interview session. We're very fortunate today to have with us, as we roll in hot on the sad state of individual rights and freedoms in Canada, with a very able wingman in the form of Pastor Artur Pawlowski. The good pastor and his street church congregation have been unshakable in their refusal to bow down before unsubstantiated Wuhan virus pandemic measures over the course of the last 4 years. And he has the unique distinction of being Canada's most ticketed pastor. How ironic is it that the pastor left communist Poland with his family as a young lad, only to find himself harassed and jailed by Canada for refusing to give up his charter right to worship and tend to his flock. Welcome, Pastor. It's so good to have you on board with us today. And by way of starting, what I'd like to do is cut away to, it's a little bit of an advertisement for your upcoming book. And I want to show the folks just what that is all about. And there it is there. The book is called Lions Do Not Bow. I think really it's Lions Do Not Bow Before Hyenas. The book is a detailed account of your challenges and hardships and faced during 50-day stay in Canadian prison. And what I'd like to do is talk about that 50 days. How did you wind up in jail and Canadian prison for that length of time, and what did that entail? Could you give the audience an idea of how that went?
Yeah, well, let me back a little bit. As you can tell, I am a Polish immigrant. I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and I witnessed the uprising, the Polish solidarity movement in the 80s. And I think that's very important for the people to understand that we immigrants coming to our beloved Canada, we have a different perspective on liberties, God and state given rights, because we grew up in hell. Quite often when people ask me, about my childhood and growing up behind the Iron Curtain, the one word that comes to mind is hell. Everything is controlled. Depression, suicide, alcoholism, no hope, no future. Is just horrible. No rule of law, no human rights. And also, I am a Polish immigrant, so Poland, of course, historically speaking, has a history of other people coming and attacking our land. Of course, during the Second War, 1939, the Nazis decided to attack Poland first. So I guess liberty and freedom is in our DNA. We as Polish people, we value those rights and we are willing to stand for those freedoms. Also, I am a Christian. And why this is so important? Because Jesus Christ was the biggest freedom fighter, if you will, that ever lived. He actually lived, was born, lived, walked among us, died, and rose from the grave for freedom, believe it or not. So we as Christians, we value freedom, and not just our freedom, but you also have a right to say no to God. That's your God-given right. You don't have to follow his commandments. You don't have to obey or do things he wants you to do. There are consequences to your actions, but you're free to make that personal choice. So we grew up in Poland where everything was completely controlled by the Polish government. I mean, everything, where you work, where you go to school, how much sausage you can buy, how much sugar a month you can have, a gasoline. You couldn't just go to a gas station and fill your tank. No. It was the government that was allowing you to buy so much, and that's it. They were food stamps, they were gasoline stamps. You couldn't just go to a store and buy whatever you needed. Every single day, it was hunting for necessities of life. It's incredible. Once a year, if I was blessed, twice a year, I would see a chocolate. So when I'm sharing my story and letting people know in the West what life looks like under totalitarian regime, and when I start sharing some of my stories people's eyes are getting big because they have a very hard time to comprehend what I'm saying, how evil you have to become to control every single little aspect of people's lives. But that's what we're witnessing right now. Implementations of little laws, bigger laws. It's like my son says, death by 1,000 bylaws. And
is that what's motivating you, Pastor? Is that what's motivating you right now? Do you feel like Canada is headed back to the hell of your Polish youth? Is that what you see?
100%. I mean, there is no doubt in our minds, and this is not just my personal opinion. When I talk to people from the post-Soviet bloc, if you will, or from other countries that have a dictatorship, right away, we don't have to explain anything. We see it right away. This is a soft dictatorship. Don't kid yourself. The liberal NDP and conservative government, they want to control every aspect of your life right now. It's a big government, well fed, and the rest of us subjects or serfs or slaves. Social insurance number, we are paying now over 50% in taxes. That's craziness at the highest levels. During the era of the Middle Ages, if the king would raise taxes to 10%, he had a revolt because people said, "You're not God. You tithe 10% to the church," and the kings usually took 6-8% of taxes. But now we pay 55%, and somehow this is okay. Income tax, tax upon the tax, breathing tax, carbon tax. I mean, the list is so big, it's absolutely crazy. So yes, I see a repetition of history, and that's why I am very vocal. That's why I'm yelling and screaming, and sometimes I am using rhetorics that do not go very well with the Western Canadian politeness, if you will, when I call them Nazis, when I call them Gestapo. Why am I doing this? I don't have any other means to fight. The only weapon that I have is my words. So I'm trying to use language that perhaps will slap the Westerners in the face, and maybe they will pay attention to what's really going on from a mouth of a Polish immigrant or German. I have Germans in our church as well, and they say the same thing. This is Gestapo. This is no longer peace officer. We are dealing with Gestapo. What is Gestapo? Gestapo is a political police monitoring your behavior, your words, your dissatisfaction with the ruling party. That's exactly what we have right now with the Trudeau government. He's monitoring our speech. He wants to censor. He's deplatforming cancel culture. It's happening. So going back to your original question, I just wanted people to understand why I am so determined to push back, because I see this as a repetition of history. So when you become vocal right away, totalitarian regimes or dictatorships, people in power take notice, and they noticed me very early on. I started to be very influential. I had TV show, I was on the radio, I was writing articles all around the world, actually, highly successful articles that
year was that, sir? What year? What time frame was that? You were writing articles and being on TV.
That was 2005, believe it or not, and it was 2005 when the Canadian authorities started to harass us. So my ordeal didn't start with the latest lie. They have been attacking us and our church and our rights since 2005. And you mentioned that I have become the most ticketed pastor in Canada. I think I am the most ticketed man in a history of this country. Over 350 citations, 16 arrests, and over 120 court cases, and still counting. That my ordeal has not ended. I'm still in courts, hunted down. My brother David was arrested with me 12 times. My son Nathaniel, 5 times already. Why? Because he dared to speak, to testify before the European Parliament when I was on house arrest. I spent about 2 years under arrest, 2 months in prison, 50 days in remand. Of course, I was in jail, in and out before. and then a year and a half on house arrest, 3 years of dealing with probation officers. This is insanity. This is Soviet style dealing with political dissidents or clergy that will not fall in line. So I was very vocal. I got tickets. I got arrested. I became the first Canadian in a modern history to be arrested for publicly reading Bible in 2006 without amplification in a public park to 6 parishioners. Not a big deal. And yet I was arrested by 7 officers, charged with criminal offenses, and I faced a year of imprisonment. So I won. They kept harassing us, ticketing. I received tickets for giving free goods and services, believe it or not. I got tickets for illegal distribution of printed material, Bibles, gospel tracts. If you give a sandwich to a dying child on the streets of Calgary, you can go to prison for that crime. It's insanity. Bylaws after bylaws after bylaws. Red tape. So 2015, I win, and they were not happy. I won in a court of appeals multiple times. They left me be, and then 2020 showed up. And as you remember, I became the first Canadian to get this big lie ticket. And then I got millions of dollars worth of tickets, over 40 citations during that era. And they were coming to our church every single time. We were feeding the poor. And by the way, the first ticket that we received was again for feeding the homeless people during the time when the shelters were shut down and soup kitchens were deemed illegal, while abortion clinics were essential services, marijuana stores, liquor stores. So this double standard you see throughout of my ordeal. Fast forward, my record is over 120 police officers, 52 police cars, 20 cops on bicycles, anti-terrorists, special SWAT team, and chief of police at our church service. And I end up with 15 COVID tickets for that era. So for that day alone. Anyway, fast forward, they invaded our church building. That's where the Get Out Nazi video came from, which was watched over 1 billion times during the 2021 weekend.
I recall that. Yeah.
And they were not happy. They were not happy, so they came with a vengeance. And they found few crooked judges like Adam Germain, John Rook, the Crook, as I call him, and David Gates. And they gave them the power to arrest me. And I was arrested multiple times. My brother David, and now is my son, 5 times. He has been arrested and charged. So I was charged with inciting people to come to church, officiating an illegal gathering, participating in illegal gathering, not wearing a muzzle, officiating an outdoor church, baptizing my daughter in a river, you name it. They came hammering us, contempt of court. Believe it or not, Adam Germain, that crooked judge in the province of Alberta, gave us a compelled speech order. I don't know if you heard about this. It was the judge that commanded us every time we talk to another human being, either in a church, media, he commanded us by court order to give us, to recite a script, a government approved script about the COVID lie.
I do recall that. I do recall that. That was absolutely amazing that you would think that they could compel your speech. As you went through all these tickets and court cases and arrests, was the government, the authorities, were they ever required to show proof to demonstrate that you were indeed presenting a hazard in any way? Did they have to show that in court?
No, never. Every single time evidence was used was from my live streaming or my own pictures that I posted, because I was never hiding what I do. My job as a clergy is a very public job, and it's being scrutinized, and rightfully so. What I do, I preach, which is live streamed online. And also I feed thousands of people to this day. For 25 years, I take care of the homeless people. So we feed thousands of people on the streets, plus we take care of the poor, single moms and poor families, and etc. So government has never come with any proof that we were endangering life or that we were spreading anything. There has never been, at least from their part, a requirement by the courts to force them to bring, okay, so Artur Pawlowski fed those people, because remember, my charges were very specific. They were specifically connected to my job as a church leader, as a pastor. So I was not charged with other things. I was always in the capacity of my job. So I preached at the rallies, I attended protests, I did my best to keep the peace, I advocated for peace. And by the way, my prison term, I spent for a sermon at the border. I was not blocking the streets. I was not advocating for blocking of the streets. I was there to do a church service, and I gave 19-minute sermon. During my sermon, I told Canadian people to stay peacefully, no guns, no swords, do it solidarity style, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin, Luther King Jr. style, civil rights movement style, do not comply, refuse to cooperate, however, do it peacefully. And it was for that sermon and multiple other sermons, I was arrested multiple times and charged criminally. So believe it or not, I went to a private property in a restaurant. I had Lord's Supper with those people. We had prayer. We were singing hymns, and I gave them a 19 minutes, a little bit from our heart, a little bit from history, telling them with God we win idea. I was arrested by every force in the land. RCMP is like American version of FBI. Detectives, uniformed Calgary police, undercover, special anti-terrorism team, and a SWAT team came outside my home, and I was arrested, interrogated for hours, stripped naked, taken to remand, solitary confinement, 44 days, I think I spent in solitary confinement, concrete cells, no water, no washroom, metal cages, denied access to lawyers. Even when I had access to lawyers, it was monitored by a guard that was taking notes. And then once I had a meeting with the lawyer, and we only could talk on the phone. There was every 2 minutes had a message that everything is recorded completely illegally, but they did it. My write-ups for the eyes of the lawyer, that I was writing things while I was remembering what they did to me, confiscated, and then we forced them to give it back. So you mentioned the book, all of this ordeal, the background story, why I said what I said, why I do what I do, the arrests, what the torture I endured. Because you got to remember, they kept me in metal cages, small little cages, for I don't know what reason. To this day, we have no answers why they did that. Why they denied me water and washroom. All those different things don't make any sense. I have never been arrested for any violent crime. I have never been charged with assault. Every ticket I received, it was always associated to me feeding the poor, preaching the gospel, doing church distribution of Bibles and stuff like this, which
it seems like they're just purposely set to break you, is what they want to do. They want to break you and make you come to heel.
100%. During that time, twice the Crown prosecutor, that liar, manipulator Stephen Johnston from a special prosecutors team, which is assigned to hunt down every political dissident in the province of Alberta, believe it or not. He is in charge of all the prosecutors prosecuting all the the Coutts people, Milk River protests, special assigned as devil, if you will. And he lied so many times to the judges through different proceedings, and that's fine. There are no consequences to those people. So
they took the stick to you, Pastor, but did they ever offer you the carrot?
Oh yeah, 100%. During my time in prison, twice they offered me to get out if I signed a little paper that says I'm guilty to the lowest of the crime that they were accusing me of. So I was offered that twice. Then finally I was kidnapped by sheriffs, taken to Edmonton, placed in MaxPod. MaxPod is for the most dangerous terrorists in the country. I was there alone, hundreds of cells empty, and just Artur Pawlowski in solitary confinement, freezing conditions, guarded by 3 guards. Then, shockingly, I was taken from that place, and they took me to a psych ward without the evaluation of the doctors, without the knowledge even of Alberta Health Services, completely illegal. The judge learned about what those people were doing to me. 5 different inmates testified that the guards were giving them incentives to murder me in prison. By the way, my house was lit on fire in the middle of the night. Church was lit on fire. They burned down our bus, a children's bus. They unscrewed tires in my pickup truck. I was physically attacked multiple times. So the threats were really, really real. Antifa would jump, run in our backyard. So the threats were really, really crazy. And the judge learned about all of this and let me out on bail, placed on house arrest. So fast forward, I started to talk, do interviews, let the people know what's going on. Of course, my book that I wrote in prison and my lawyer smuggled it outside of the prison, it's coming out, which has all the details of everything I'm sharing a little bit here. Of course, it's a big story, multiple arrests, a lot of charges. And they offered me, believe it or not, they offered me a guaranteed seat. The Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, to shut me up, offered me a guaranteed seat at the legislature if I would just keep my mouth shut. Then I was offered a government job, $250,000. Then I was offered other trinkets. The biggest amount that the government was offering me so far was $2 million and a land, just to shut me up. And after they realized that was going on for 8 months, about 10 different meetings and a phone call with the Premier. And after that, she called me, by the way. And after all of that, I started to receive phone calls from political fixers. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term. Political fixers are the people that are facilitating kinds of, different meetings where the politicians don't want to be seen or heard. And so I had about 3 months of that ordeal with threats, blackmail, and threats of assassination in prison if I don't comply. I was told that if I don't withdraw myself from the public life for at least 2 years, I'm not coming out of prison. I was told that the judge is bought and paid for. Gordon Krinke is the judge. And they were right. They were right. The judge found me guilty on everything. He said that every person that participated in a truck convoy is a criminal. And therefore, because I was encouraging the criminals, I'm a criminal as well. He found me guilty of everything, including terrorism. I was charged with interfering with the crucial infrastructure under the Defense Act. First Canadian ever charged with this, first Canadian ever to be found guilty of that charge. Also, I was charged with inciting mischief, and I became the first Canadian ever to be found guilty of inciting mischief. Also, breach of release order. Fast forward, last September was sentencing, and because of international outrage, if you will, tens of thousands of phone calls and emails from people around the world, the Canadian government decided that they don't want to turn me into a martyr, and they sentenced
I think they already have.
61 days, and because I already spent 50 days in prison, that in remand, that counts a day and a half. So I walked out of the court, found guilty and sentenced. Of course, we appealed the decision already. And here is what I did. I filed probably the biggest lawsuit in the history of Canada. I'm going after Attorney General. I'm going after the prison. I'm going after Alberta Health Services, Chief of Police Newfield, Calgary Police, RCMP, hundreds of people. And I'm not only going after monetary compensation for what they've done to me, I am alleging conspiracy to commit crime. What we are saying is that those people conspired together to hurt me and my family. Of course, we have all the proof that they did it. And I'm telling you, We filed in December. We are presently in court. I already received phone calls that this will take 10 years, millions of dollars. They will destroy me financially. I should quit. There is no way I can win. So they're already scared. We did a press conference with the mainstream media. And when they heard the allegations, which are, of course, we will prove them without a shadow of a doubt, they decided to put the cap on the story. So Canadians do not know that we have been doing this. And
No.
and we are in the
No.
court right now. July, it's our appearance before the judge, and we'll continue. So here is what I want to accomplish. I want to uncover who was giving them orders, who did this to us. And the civil litigation is a perfect example, a perfect opportunity to uncover that. And I think they're scared. They know that what they did, they cannot justify. I mean, putting me in a metal cages, how you can justify this, which is well documented. Arresting me in the middle of the highway for just keeping the church's door open. How you justify that? You know, how you can justify any of it.
You consider Omar Khadr when he was held as a prisoner of war in an American military detention facility in Guantanamo. He was not afforded a lawyer, and for that, forget about metal cages, forget about torture, forget about threats, anything else. Just for not having a lawyer at the ready, he was awarded $10 million.
Yeah, 10.5 by liberal government. But you know, we're living right now in a very peculiar times where terrorists are rewarded and Christians are hunted down. Everything is upside down. Evil is called good and good is called evil. But I want people to understand something. You're talking to a Polish immigrant. I don't have powerful friends. I don't have money. And yet somehow I was able, by the grace of God, survive over 120 court cases, criminal charges, King's Bench, provincial, criminal courts, you name it. I fought with attorney generals multiple times, Alberta, federal, and I survived because in the end of the day, truth wins. And I want people to understand that if a man like me with a broken English can do it, that means anyone can. What we need to do is what the Polish people did it in the 80s. They came in solidarity with each other. And they said enough is enough. We're nobody's slaves. And they pushed this great evil of empire, the empire of evil, away, and Europe was liberated, and not just Europe, lots of countries. It was done before, we can do it again. And that's the story of Artur Pawlowski. The story is not, look at poor me, what the government did to me. No, despite what the government did to me, look at me, I'm still standing, I'm still pushing, I'm still fighting. And we are lions. That's the name of the book. Lions do not bow before the hyenas, because we have, you know, truth. Lions always stand for the truth. And God, Jesus, is called the Lion from the tribe of Judah. So we must learn or understand, receive that truth, who we are. And
you think that's why they're coming after you? And I'll tell you what, I noticed on one of your Facebook entries, you show a scene where there are pro-Palestinian protesters across the street, all kinds of them. They got flags, they got signs, they're making a lot of noise, they got megaphones. And then on your side of the street, you have a sign. It's just a single solitary sign. But here come the peace officers, the bylaw officers, and they go immediately to your sign and start pulling it down. And meanwhile, the pro-Palestinians across the street get a free ticket. Is obviously there's something going on here where some groups are okay and other groups are not okay, and it looks like the groups that aren't okay are the Jewish groups and the Christian groups. Now, are they coming after the Christians because of this belief in freedom, in truth, in feeling that defines our humanity, and is that why we're seeing this discombobulation?
Yes, 100%. What we are observing right now is controlled demolition. What the globalists are doing, they are dismantling everything that is good, family oriented, and faith, if you will, is a very dangerous to the pharaohs, because the pharaohs, the modern day pharaohs, and even the older ones, they believe they're gods. So suddenly they don't want anyone or anything to compete with them. Whatever they say becomes the law. Fauci was a perfect example, and here in Canada as well, those so-called chief health officers, whatever they were saying became automatically a law. Of course, it was not the law. It was a suggestion. However, the law enforcement agents were treating this as the law. And we were hammered because of some psychopaths saying lies in front of the camera. Fauci just testified before the Congress, and he said, yeah, we've made up this whole thing. We've made up the 6 feet apart and other things. And I said, and I just wanted to yell and scream, I've told you so, people. I've told you from the very beginning, because I know the tactics. And when the tactics of the totalitarian regime showed up, we immigrants, we could pick it up right away. It's a repetition of history. So what we are witnessing right now is a takedown of what's good, and is being replaced with chaos. Because when you have chaos, they can control the population, and that's exactly what they want. They want to control your rights, they want to control your families, your children, they want to control your food. Now they want to control your water, and that's what is happening. So the people on the other side screaming genocide, they want to murder an entire nation, but they're okay and protected by the law. But our side, you got to remember, what did the sign say? It's a very clear, peaceful message. It says there will be no peace in the Middle East until they receive the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. It's a very peaceful sign. Hey, guys, stop hating each other, receive peace, and Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And this ends, because this fight is a fight between brothers. So, but that's a dangerous message if you want chaos. If you truly want chaos, if this is a controlled demolition, everyone and anyone that brings a different message, peace, no guns, no swords, no violence, hope, right? You gotta remember, during the takedown, hope is prohibited by law because they don't want people to have hope. That's why I believe pastors were hammered the most during that time, because we are givers of hope. And if you think about it, it's a fascinating story, because I was the first one as a pastor, not blocking the streets. I didn't went over there with a farming equipment or a big rig or a semi-truck. I went there just to conduct the church service. And out of all the truck convoy people, which about 2 million people participated in this, and there were some key players, they decided to arrest a pastor first. I was arrested as the first person in a truck convoy week before. They arrested Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and others a week before. Why? What did I say that is scared Canadian government so much? Well, the message was very clear: no violence, and it was a message of hope, telling people that historically speaking, we've seen this before, and we can use the same tactics as other people used 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And that scared them so much that they decided to come and arrest me outside of my home and imprison me. And you got to remember, the Crown prosecutor said it multiple times that they will keep me in prison for 2 years at least. And only by the grace of God, because they outdo themselves by keeping me in metal cages and all those different psych wards and other places, that the judge look at this like, this is insane, and let me out against the wishes of the government and place me on house arrest. We got to remember, there are other people in Alberta that are still imprisoned from coups.
It's almost as though it seems like the government is forcing an anti-human agenda down the throats of Canadians, where, as you say, hope is a sin. Hope is a crime. forget about individual rights and freedoms as guaranteed by the charter, and that really strikes me is that the charter could be so frivolously and easily torn up and shredded, and is no longer. It doesn't even seem to be there anymore, even with our judicial system. Now, it kind of speaks to, you talk about the rule of law, which is in our preamble of the charter, along with the supremacy of God. And that seems like it's under full attack. That preamble that kind of sets the stage and the tone of the whole charter that follows, it's coming under tremendous attack. So this rule of law, we got one rule for you, and we got one rule for them, is completely disintegrated.
Yeah, and we observed that during the big attack on our lives in the past 4 years, the politicians were partying, as you remember. When I was being arrested with my brother David in the middle of the highway by anti-terrorists, Jason Kenney, the premier of Alberta, with his ministers, had a whiskey party. No social distancing, not wearing a muzzle.
Yes, I remember that.
At the same time, they were not even waiting. At the same time, they're partying. They were caught red-handed. But of course, no one was arresting them. No one was ticketing them. But the pastor here with his brother, it was a takedown of El Chapo of Alberta, Al Capone of Canada. While our crime was just doing a church service, giving people hope in a time when people
Black
were
Lives
desperate.
Matters.
Yeah,
Black Lives Matters at Parliament Hill with the Prime Minister kneeling down before a crowd of Black Lives Matter folks who obviously weren't constrained by any of the rules and regulations and edicts that the rest of us had to undergo, because we couldn't assemble in more than groups of 10.
Yeah, and I witnessed that. I witnessed that in Calgary. So when we were attacked without mercy for feeding the homeless, out of all the crimes that I have been committing, according to them, they have chosen to destroy us because we were saving lives. And yet their rhetorics was, well, we have to do this to save lives. So how are you going to save 15 to 20,000 different homeless individuals when you will shut down the shelters and soup kitchens and will not feed them? How are you saving them, you people? And that's why we've lost thousands of homeless people died during that time because of what government did. But going back to Black Lives Matter, when we were hunted down, I went with my camera and I did reporting multiple times where we had 5,000-6,000 different individuals taking the whole downtown and marching, no social distancing. Most were not wearing a muzzle and were protected by the politicians and the police enforcement agency. Yes. So you cannot, in a society that stands for law and order, you cannot have double application of the law. Law should apply equally to everyone, but of course that was denied to us. So my beef with those people always has been the same. You people are lawless gangsters in uniform. You act like Gestapo. You selectively choose whom to target because of politics, not because of law and order. And to this day, I'm still in court. My appeal is happening September the 10th. I am in court this month and in November. So we are still fighting. We still ask people to come and help us. And if you want to do it, it's streetchurch.ca, streetchurch.ca. You can come and help us out, because their idea, the crooked government's idea is to bleed us. Their idea is, we're going to make it so hard and difficult for you that you will not be able to keep fighting us because of finances. Lawyers are absolutely crazy expensive, and they know that. They know an average person possibly cannot survive this attack on our liberties unless you can afford it. And I cannot afford it by myself. That's why we're crowdfunding. We're asking people, please chip in. We still feed thousands of people on the streets of Calgary, never stop. But on top of that, we need support for the legal bills, and the fight continues. I hope that the book will enlighten lots of people into seeing what's really going on in our country and how come this nation of ours our beloved Canada, that used to be known as the peacekeepers around
Yes.
the world, has become the aggressors.
Mhm.
How come we've turned so quickly from polite, tolerant, nice people into vicious animals that
Yes.
rat on neighbors because they are watering flowers, as we see right now in the city of Calgary and in Quebec? It's unbelievable.
Well, Prime Minister Trudeau says Canada's back, but I really don't know what he's talking about, because I don't see us going back to any Canada I recognized from my previous lifetime. But you know, it's not just Canada. And maybe in closing, I'll point out that we got the same situation happening across the West. I mean, across liberal democracies throughout the world. You see Europe, you see the United States. All of these freedom-loving peoples are under attack, and their way of lives are under attack with all these funny ideas. So it makes one think, what's going on here? Is there a wizard behind the curtain who's pulling all the levers? What do you think? Where's this all coming from?
Well, I think there are two sources. First of all, we have to understand that we have walked away from God. Canada was built, the West was built on the Word of God. And it's very interesting because the founding fathers, the pilgrims that came to North America specifically, they went to their knees and they dedicated this land to God. They made kind of a partnership with God because they escaped persecution. If you know your story, famine, persecution in Europe, England, of course, was forcing people to be Anglicans, and all those different things. And people came to North America trying to build a new world without persecution, where a man can work hard and achieve something beautiful and pass it to the next generation. That's
It was
under
like an
attack.
exodus.
Yeah, but the thing is that we started well. I think there was never a perfect nation. So don't get me wrong. We always, when people are, there is a problem. However, the idea was beautiful. Even you mentioned the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that starts with this preamble, whereas Canada acknowledges the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Of course, our national anthem is a prayer to God. A peace tower has scriptures. Dominion of Canada comes from the Psalm. So we have this writing everywhere of people, what was their idea of North America. And we walked completely away from that. We murder God's creation. We pervert those kids that survive. We have the biggest amount of fentanyl overdose ever recorded in the history of our country, biggest amount of suicide ever recorded in the history of our country. So we've walked away from freedom because God is freedom. There is a scripture that says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And that's the pattern that I see everywhere. I traveled around the world, and I've seen that 20, 30 years ago in France, in England, in Ireland, everywhere you go in Europe, you see this walking away from God. And when God leaves, who remains? So you've got two things. I think that God is allowing this vicious attack on us because he wants our attention. And of course, enemy, they have a plan, and they are not even hiding that plan. They are telling you, you will own nothing and you will be happy, while the over 1,000 private jets went to Davos, eating the most expensive steaks, flying private jets, driving SUVs. And those people are telling you, you will own nothing. Why? Because we will own everything. And Bill Gates, for example, is the #1 landowner in the United States of America right now. People are not paying attention to what's really going on. They are turning us into slaves. They're creating two categories of people: them, the elites, the pharaohs, and you, the slaves. Social insurance number that, it can be discarded very easily. They don't care about your life. So people must wake up while they still can, because what we're witnessing right now, I believe, is the biggest attack ever recorded in the history of mankind. This is the biggest demolition of middle class ever attempted. They're creating two categories of people. And of course, Christians are always, historically speaking, in a way of every dictatorship and totalitarian regime. Because if you're a real Christian, if you're truly a real Christian, so I feed everyone in our lineups. I don't ask questions. It doesn't matter if you're a homosexual, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Christian, if you're rich or poor, woman or man. It doesn't matter. How old are you? If you're standing in our lineups, that means you need our services, and I'll gladly feed you without questions. But of course, we are a church, so we preach, we sing, we talk, and we pray for people. But you don't have to be subjected to this. Grab your food and go. But most of the people stay because they are hungry for messages of positivity and hope. So we walked away from God, and because we did, we have mess. So my answer to this problem is actually very straightforward. Bring God back to your nation. When he shows up, he comes with freedom and he comes with prosperity. So if Canadians want to prosper and be free, we must go back to the foundation of our nation, which was God was everywhere. And until that happens, I'm telling you, what is going to happen? Economy is collapsing. Canada is in the worst shape from all the G7 nations. We have the biggest national and private debt. People are losing their homes as we speak. Fiat currency is being shaved. If you go to store, you notice it's a big difference. So it's a controlled demolition, and they're doing. All the parties are guilty. All of the parties are guilty. The Liberals, NDP, and Conservatives came together and are doing this against us as we speak. Where was Pierre Poilievre when we were bleeding on the streets of our cities? Where was Daniel Smith when we were being arrested and hunted down? Nowhere to be found. Because they were not interested, because they're part of the elite. They've never missed a paycheck. Actually, quite opposite. They gave themselves a raise while our businesses were destroyed. Our people were arrested, elderly murdered, children subjected to cruelty. All of those people are guilty. In my opinion, the politicians that were in charge from all the three parties during that time should be charged with treason. If I was your king, that's what exactly I would do. I would charge them with treason and send a message to the rest. If you don't follow the law, well, the law will follow you. Eventually, you will pay for your crimes. But people, I think in Canada, they don't want yet a man like me. I am too black and white. I see things only as good as or as evil, and I'm not for sale. I think that's the biggest shocker for the Canadian government. Because they are not used to a man like me. Normal people take bribes, normal people take trinkets, but I'm not for sale. I have been bought by the precious blood of Jesus, and Artur Pawlowski and my family is not for sale. So they don't know how to deal with that. You were giving you $2 million and you don't want to take? No, I don't want to be nobody's slave. I don't want to be a puppet in your hands, because the only, I need funds. Of course I do. However, when you donate to our ministry, no strings attached. No strings attached. I'm nobody's slave and I'm nobody's puppet. So my Jesus didn't die on the cross so you can enslave me. But they don't understand that because they are slaves themselves to some other puppet masters. And they think that everyone is just corrupted and crooked like them. I think society is not ready yet for people like us. I think we have to wait a little bit longer when everything crumbles and comes down, and perhaps from the ashes, we will be able to rebuild our beloved Canada. Because I'm telling you, if I had the power, I would turn Canada into Saudi Arabia if it comes to prosperity. We have resources. We got everything your heart desires to be the most prosperous nation on earth. But our politicians,
it seems like we're purposely taking those possibilities off the table. We can't use our resources the way we should be using them. But you might make a lousy politician, but you're a great inspiration, Pastor. I can assure you of that. And in closing, is there anything you mentioned your website? Could you mention it again for where we could go for donations and to get spun up on what you're doing?
Yes, streetchurch.ca, street, because we are on the streets, and that's our core ministry. We feed every single week thousands of people on the streets of Calgary, and not just the homeless. We have, of course, we are taking care of other people as well. Streetchurch.ca. And in closing, I just wanna close this way. Remember that we have already won. The enemy just doesn't know it yet. Do not live your life in depression or despair. Remember that when you live your life with God and you have family and friends, that's pretty much what you really need. Form a community, love one another, support one another, especially because tough times are coming and you will need that community structure. And remember that historically speaking, truth will win. And I would say to you, we have already won. The enemy just doesn't know it yet. We know how the story ends. We read the book. We know the ending. So don't lose hope and be a good person, because one day you're going to stand before the living God, the judge of judges that does not take any bribes. And we're all going to be accountable for everything we said and everything we have done. So be blessed, stay strong. And remember, lions do not bow before the hyenas. We eat them for breakfast.
Okay. With that said, very much thanks for this, Pastor, and all the best to you and your church as you move forward in this fight. Thanks again.
Thank you. God bless you.